What's going on, y'all? It's JD Piquel. Welcome into the Hard Count. Happy Thanksgiving wherever you are, however you may be listening, whether you're on podcast right now listening to this whole thing back on your drive to Thanksgiving, maybe you're going to see the in-laws, maybe your wife's riding shotgun, whatever it is. We're so grateful you're spending some time with us. We're grateful for you here on this Thanksgiving week at the Hard Count. We have got a lot to talk about. It is the finale of the regular season. It is rivalry week. And weeks like this are why we love college football so much. Because 365 days a year, you'll be talking about whatever happens this upcoming Saturday. Because your school beat that other school, right? Like the school that you just can't stand. You don't even wear their colors. You don't insert their color here in their wardrobe, in your wardrobe rather. This is why we love college football. I'll take a very quick moment to get on my soapbox. Just imagine a world where you have the greatest rivalry in all of college sports, maybe all of sports in Michigan, Ohio State. It's a playoff game this weekend, right? Imagine a world where that game is being played for seeding, right? Breaks my heart too. So I'll leave it at that, but we have a jam-packed show. We're about to give you our prediction for the game, Michigan, Ohio State, which we will be at, by the way. Going to break that one down, and it's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of people will be there. We've talked about it with some of our personnel down there from Letterman Row, the On3 Ohio State site, and they are expecting an absolute zoo. So fired up for that one. Like I said, going to give you our winner. Little sunshine showdown. Florida and Florida State, kind of a tale of two programs these past couple of weeks. Game means a lot to Mike Norvell and company. I'll tell you that right now. Billy Napier, they stumbled against Vanderbilt. I understand. We're going to talk about that just a little bit, but that one's going to be a whole lot of fun to break down. And also in a rivalry week, whatever you think you know about the opposition, whatever you think you know about your opponent, throw it out the window. You don't need logic. You don't need common sense. This is the week where all those things can stay at home. So when you're packing for Thanksgiving, make sure you leave that when breaking down your rival. Notre Dame is going to USC, and how about how juicy this matchup is going to be? USC, in my humble opinion, controls their own destiny to get to the college football playoff, but you got to get through the Irish. And the Irish, a lot of people left in the, whatever you want to call it, rearview mirror, whatever, place you want to leave the Irish, that's where they left them after the Marshall game. And Notre Dame just continuing to surge under Marcus Freeman. Tons of talent within that program. They're continuing to develop, and I'm excited for this one. I think Notre Dame is going to give USC a really good push, and that'll be fun. That'll be a whole lot of fun. As like we said, rivalry week, can never count anybody out. Then you got the Oregon Classic, Oregon and Oregon State, little platypus action between the Ducks and the Beavers. Going to break that one down as Bo Nix and company continue to surge. Dan Lanning, in just his first year as the head coach at Oregon, doing some really good things. So we'll give you our pick there, and then we'll wrap this whole thing up with the Palmetto Bowl, Clemson and South Carolina. Clemson and South Carolina. That one is a lot more intriguing this weekend than maybe it was when you looked at the schedule last week. I mean, South Carolina put on an absolute clinic against Tennessee, and Clemson, we thought about leaving them for dead as well against Notre Dame, but they've just continued to play well, and here we are. Clemson, if they're a one-loss conference champ, is there some playoff implications in this game? I don't know. Remains to be seen. But at the end of this whole deal, bringing you into the program, the best thing that we do here, you join in the party. So with that being said, get your questions in right now to Nick Brake, the keeper of the queue. We'll make sure we answer those as quickly and as efficient as possible. Before we get into this prediction, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, we would love to have you here. All right, we've had a ton of you join in just the last couple of weeks. Had nearly 1,000 of you join us on Sunday. If you haven't yet joined the party, the water's fine. Jump on in. Let's get to it, huh? The moment that we've all been waiting for. Lost a lot of sleep over this one. Ohio State is hosting Michigan in what will essentially be a playoff game. It's a noon kick, and right now the line is Ohio State minus 7.5. We'll see if that line moves just a little bit. But we all remember what happened last year. Jim Harbaugh and company took care of business at home and just imposed their physical will on Ohio State. And that took Ohio State to take a good look at themselves in the offseason, look in the mirror and say, we got to become more physical. We have to be able to match them stride for stride. And Ohio State's done that a lot. We're going to break it all down. Right now for Michigan, they're just kind of on what they like to call a happy mission. Every time Jim Harbaugh takes the podium for a press conference, he doesn't seem overly stressed out or anxious. I mean, in fact, fitting, it's Thanksgiving week, talked a lot about how grateful he was for the opportunity to play against Ohio State and have this kind of stage. So Michigan, they're just on that happy mission that continues. I wonder just a little bit if the win last year for the Wolverines translates to a little extra swag. Like now that you've beaten Ohio State, you got that monkey off your back. Is there maybe a little bit of extra pep in your step for Michigan now that you are coming into this game having won it last time around? I don't know. Remains to be seen, but it's something to watch for. Business as usual, or at least perceived business as usual in terms of the front they're putting on publicly. But I promise you, this game, I mean, they're going to be charged up. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. They're going to be charged up, be ready to go into Columbus. Now, Ohio State will be very much charged up. The blood is hot. And there was a comment made by Jim Harbaugh during the post game of last year's contest, where essentially he just said, we got people talking like they hit a triple when they're on third base and they didn't hit a triple. Is paraphrasing basically what he said. But essentially, it was a very subtle dig at Ryan Day, talking about, hey, you didn't build this program. You just stepped into the spot and have reaped the benefits of that. Tell you what, they remember that in Columbus. They remember that one just fine, and those comments are still running through the minds of not only Buckeye fans, but I promise you, internally, that's something that they are making sure is remembered by all parties. Okay, so if you needed any motivation to get ready for this week, you have it right there in Jim Harbaugh bulletin board material. You know how we do it on this program. Those of you that have been with us for a while, we thank you. And you already know what I'm going to say. If you haven't yet joined the party, subscribe. But the way that we break down these games is hinge points, meaning that point, this variable is on a hinge. Whichever way it swings, that's who we think this game will have the advantage. The first hinge point that I'm looking at, what is required of J.J. McCarthy? Now, J.J. McCarthy, extremely talented. Took over the starting quarterback spot from Cade McNamara, who actually won this game a year ago and got him to the college football playoff and won a Big Ten title. They're rolling with J.J. McCarthy because of his potential and his arm talent and the extra element he brings to this offense. And so far, it's been a smashing success. So I'll say that. But Michigan, you know it and I know it. Ohio State knows it. They want to run the football. They want to control the line of scrimmage. They want to run power. They want to move you against your will and have that just be the way that your afternoon goes. So for J.J. McCarthy, up to this point, it's mostly been, hey, manage the offense, steer the ship, hand the ball to Blake Corum, hand the ball to Donovan Edwards, hit a guy off play action in the flat, make the intermediate throw, be able to keep us on schedule, make plays where you have to. Well, in a game like this, I'm just curious what's asked of him in the sense of, are they able to have that kind of success on the ground? Because Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, both guys that are, it sounds like a little bit banged up. Jim Harbaugh hasn't given an update, but obviously Blake Corum went out of the game against Illinois, played one snap in the second half, to my understanding, and like that's, very much a question. Because when Blake Corum left the game, and they didn't have Donovan Edwards last week, they ran for something around, 50-ish yards, I believe it was, in the second half. Stokes had 11 carries, 36 yards, right around 3 yards a carry. Everybody knows that can't be the way that Michigan gets down in the run game. And if that is what they're doing in the run game, if they aren't able to get success and move the line of scrimmage, well, then there's going to be problems. Evidently, you're going to have problems. And so when you have problems, who do you turn to? Number 9, the quarterback. Hey, brother, when we don't have it on the ground, we got to go through the air. We need to hit some of those deep shots. And hitting those deep shots has been something that they've talked about a lot in Michigan circles and been so close on. Even defensive players from Michigan have said in practice they're hitting on those, and they're just a touch off in the game. Whether it's a drop, whether it's a little bit overthrown, whether it's off the mark, they've been close. So if you can connect on those, that would be the counterpunch that you need. Now imagine this kind of a situation. Imagine they run the football effectively. So opposite end of the script. Blake Corum runs the ball well. Maybe it's Donovan Edwards. Maybe it's someone else. I don't know. They get the ground game going. Well, then, first of all, you can play your game if you're Michigan, right? You can kind of exercise your own tempo and hold the ball long and impose your will. But then on top of that, guess what you have after that? You have that counterpunch, and you have a more open shot to take. It's the equivalent, I've said it before, it's the equivalent of driving to the basket and then kicking it out to your three-point shooter. It's a lot easier to make that three-point shot when the defense is getting sucked in because of what you've done, hurting them on that, driving game with the run game. Safeties start to creep up. Corners fall asleep. Linebackers start to trigger quicker. More space for your wide receivers to go deep. And if you can connect on a couple of those, it's like a cockroach. Where there's one, there's usually two or three more. So that's going to be something that I'm curious to see, because this is the biggest spot of young J.J. McCarthy's career. It just is. I mean, high school, Pop Warner, college, this is his biggest stage. And so if it's all on him, if we kind of see what we saw last week, he didn't look tremendous throwing the football. The last 3 games, he's been right around 49% in terms of his completion percentage, when he was so strong in that category earlier in the year. What do you need from J.J. McCarthy in this game to win? Very curious to see. But obviously, a lot of that hinges on the run game. Second thing I'm looking at, potentially the best player in this whole game, Marvin Harrison Jr. Name sounds familiar because his daddy played in the league and caught a lot of touchdown passes from Peyton Manning. He is ridiculous. A matchup problem, 6'4", right around 200 pounds, jumps out the gym like dude is a dog. 65 receptions, 11 touchdowns, right around 1,000 yards. He's a matchup problem. And so when you have a matchup problem, guess what you do? You allocate more resources to help supplement that matchup, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., a guy that I'm curious to see how many resources they have to allocate for. Is there a reality where you say, okay, we got to double cover you, man? Like, that would probably be my first thought if I'm Jesse Minter. Hey, we got to give a safety over the top or something extra to help guard number 18. So if that's the case, if that's the reality for Ohio State, somebody else has to step into that star role. Not that it still can't be Marvin Harrison Jr. contributing, but it's got to be Emeka Egbuka. It's got to be Julian Fleming. Stover's got to get involved. These guys, we've said for the past couple weeks, have to carry more of the load, but especially in this game. If Michigan allocates extra resources to Marvin Harrison Jr., there needs to be somebody else carrying that weight. So let's say this, though. What if they just play him straight up? If they play him straight up, the matchup to watch is him and Will Johnson. Now, Will Johnson's only a freshman, hasn't played a ton of college football, but he is a dude. And the reason why I like this matchup, or why I'm curious to watch this matchup, rather, is from a size perspective. Will Johnson, even though he's young, he's around 6'3". So those jump balls, they're not going to be, easy by any stretch of the imagination. I still think a one-on-one favors Marvin Harrison Jr., but I think he's probably the better prospect to guard Marvin Harrison Jr. because of that size advantage, or that size, matchup. The way that Michigan runs their defense, though, it's not really typical for one guy to shadow the number one receiver, but just watch that. Keep an eye on that with Will Johnson, because I'm curious how much they'll leave that young guy playing one-on-one. I think that will determine a lot of how this game goes. Final thing that we're looking at, the battle in the trenches, not between Michigan's offensive line, but rather Michigan's defensive line and Ohio State's offensive line. Because what did we say all offseason about Ohio State? Tons of talent. Nobody's denying that. I mean, they got more stars in their roster than the Galaxy, right? Like, tons of 4- and 5-star guys that can just absolutely ball. But went up to Ann Arbor last year, got it handed to them. Had 4 sacks. Got run on by 297 yards. Like, it was just a bad day for the Buckeye faithful. And you left that game saying, okay, we got to be tougher. Everybody knows it now. We have to be tougher. We have to be more physical. Well, they have trained all offseason and done a lot from a balance perspective to get to this point being a tougher team. Made a point to run the football better. 54% of the time they're running the ball. 5.5 yards a carry. Now, much like Michigan, they've got their own injury issues. Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson. We'll see. I don't expect them to, and this is my own feel, I don't have any, inside information as of right now. I feel like if there's any percentage that either of those guys can give to this game, they will do just that. Now, if the absolute worst case scenario happens, Dallin Hayden looked really strong for you last week if you're Ohio State, right? So you feel okay with him carrying the load, or at the very least playing some sort of role. But the reason why I'm looking at Ohio State's offensive line, balance is so crucial for this team. And if they can run the football, they create that balance. Kind of like what we talked about with J.J. McCarthy. C.J. Stroud and company. It's his day. It has to be his day for Ohio State to win this game. And what will make his job easier is if they're able to get those safeties creeping up. If they're able to get 6 yards on first down, 4 yards on first down with the run game, then you can be more multiple. You can keep the defense guessing. Because if it turns out kind of similar to, what we've seen in years past, not that Ohio State hasn't run the football well. I'm just saying if it ends up being the kind of game plan where Ohio State says, okay, we have to throw it around the yard to win, and that is our only weapon we can use against Michigan. If that's the reality, it's going to be a long day. You know it and I know it. There has to be some balance. Because if there's not balance and Michigan's able to just kind of play in the trenches, well, then they get to play on their own terms. Then they get to force those obvious passing situations. And that defensive line gets to get after you. And they have 2 NFL edge rushers that are just that, NFL edge rushers that are gone now. But I promise you, they still have some guys that can come off the edge for that Michigan defense. I promise you. So there will be no lack of pressure applied. I believe they're one of the best teams in the country in terms of their sack percentage, right around 8%. Okay, so they're going to be a problem for you. But if you can balance them out, if you can run the football, keep them guessing, that would be a situation that would favor the Ohio State offense, the Ohio State program. So here's our prediction. Michigan not having their running back room at 100% is my assumption. It's a big assumption, but from what we've been able to gather, I don't think they'll be at their best. And for Michigan, that's who they are, running the football. J.J. McCarthy is extremely talented. Very, very good. He's going to be really good for Michigan for a really long time. But with that being said, the run game has kind of been what they've leaned on. And Ohio State, they're not the soft Ohio State team that people have seen or at least saw last year. Soft's probably the wrong word to use, but you understand what I'm saying. They're going to give a lot better push up front defensively. Right now, they're number 4 in the country in terms of yards per carry allowed, 3.1. Okay, that's solid. JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Mike Hall, they got some guys on this defensive line, and I think that's the extra edge for them to be able to neutralize the run game, especially if they're all the way healthy. On top of that, this is a huge day for C.J. Stroud. He took last year's loss extremely personal. Went to the press conference and talked about how people were going to be mad at him. He knew that from the fan base, and he felt the loss in a very, very heavy way. I promise you, everybody's had this game circled on either roster, but C.J. Stroud's been thinking about this one for a really long time. And with his Heisman candidacy hanging in the balance, with all of the eyeballs on him and what he's going to do and how will he respond in this kind of game, I think you get a big day from C.J. Stroud. I think Dallin Hayden has a big day as well, regardless of what Mayan Williams and Traven Henderson are going to be doing. I think Dallin Hayden plays a really strong role. I think this is an absolute battle. I think we all get our money's worth. I am so fired up to be at this game and in Columbus, but I think the Ohio State Buckeyes beat Michigan, set themselves up to make a nice little college football playoff appearance, win this game 31-25 in the shoe. That's going to be a classic, man. I'm just telling you. I mean, the weather's going to be perfect in terms of like football weather. We're going to see our breath, as Ivan Mizell would say. Gosh, it's going to be poetic in every sense of the word. I'm so fired up for that one. Can't wait to meet a lot of y'all there as well. I know it's going to be a blast. We have a very solid Michigan and Ohio State following, so if you haven't yet joined the party, we'd love to have you. But this is going to be a blast. And Michigan, I hope there's no hard feelings. As Michael Scott would say, I hope we can still be friends. But I think Ohio State ends up winning that game. All right, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, we'd love to have you along for the ride. Got a lot of predictions still to get to. Let's get to the next one, shall we? The Sunshine Showdown. How's that for a tongue twister? Florida going to Florida State, 7:30 Eastern. Now, this is a Friday game. So when you get those leftovers heated up, make sure you sit down, turn this one on. Florida State's a 9.5-point favorite. And when you look at what Florida did last week, it's not super difficult to see why. Tough loss at Vanderbilt. And a lot of people now wondering, okay, what's going on within that program? We'll talk about that in a second. But a win against Florida State, that would steady the ship, right? Like of all the conversation and all the, outrage about losing to Vanderbilt, if you beat Florida State at Florida State with the year that Florida State is having right now, I promise you, all those conversations, you just turn the volume knob down a ton on that, and it's like, okay, cool. Okay, let's roll now. Let's get to the bowl game. Let's keep this thing going. So this is a big deal for Billy Napier in year one. Now, it's arguably a bigger deal for Mike Norvell. This is the kind of win that I believe he needs. And a win for him would be like an exclamation mark. Because Florida State, a lot of people kind of stopped paying attention to them after they lost to Clemson. Guess what? They haven't lost since Clemson. So, I mean, you're missing out. They've won their last 4. They're rolling. Jordan Travis playing really good football. They get 2 of their best receivers back this week. Again, we're going to talk about that in just a second. But Florida State, they're looking to put an exclamation mark on what they've done in this regular season. First hinge point for me, Florida. As a locker room, where are they now? Like, you know, those TV shows where you check in on famous people and what are they doing 5 years after, you know, their big break, whatever it may be. That's my question about this Florida program, because they were playing really good football going to Nashville, and in front of about 47 people, they lost to Vanderbilt. And this, to me, has a fork-in-the-road feel to it. And there's been a couple forks in the road for this program, but this moment, I think, how you respond and finish the year has 2 doors in front of you. The first door, that's a slap in the face, and you all know you get slapped in the face, you focus up real quick, like having a bucket of cold water poured on you. Doesn't feel good. It's pretty painful. Cheek hurts a little bit from that contact, but you're saying, okay, all right, no, that's right. Okay, we're back to it. We're back who we are. We remember. Could bring you back to reality really quick in a good way. Now, the other operation, the other potential door you could walk through is that could be the straw that broke the camel's back from a culture perspective. Man, what are we doing? We lost to Vanderbilt? Are you kidding me? And we saw, in my estimation, a poor culture that was there before Billy Napier. Got to go to Vanderbilt, got to play in front of a small crowd. It's cold. It's an early kick. That game is a chore. We got to go hit somebody. Doesn't feel good to hit anybody regardless of the weather, but especially not when it's cold out. That was what I saw against Vanderbilt. Does that continue? Does this just exponentially make things worse going forward, and you got to play Florida State, and it's like, man, this is not what we want to be doing right now. Guys are already mentally checked out. Is that the case? It's my question. I don't know that to be true. I'm just asking. I think that's a possibility, and the psyche in this game for Florida will be huge because we've seen Florida play really good football. I mean, against A&M, they looked awesome. Against South Carolina, they looked awesome. That win against South Carolina is actually looking even better after what we saw them do to Tennessee. Florida has it under the hood. They've got guys. Can they put it together, and can they keep that same focus and be consistent? This week especially, I think we learned a lot about their culture. So very, very excited to see that. Second question I have, does the Florida State defensive line wreak havoc and force long down and distances, especially on third down? The Florida State defensive line made a habit creating negative plays. Have a sack rate of 10%. Folks, that is ridiculous. Meaning, of all the snaps that are on the field, 10% of those are resulting in sacks. That is a frightening sight. And for Florida, they are really good offensively when they're able to be in those manageable situations. And that's not novel analysis. That's pretty much everybody in the country. But Florida especially, when they're backed up and it has to be a passing situation, they're not quite as dynamic. And AR is phenomenal, but when he runs effectively, he starts to pass better. And if you're dealing with the long down and distance, I'm assuming you're not going to be running super effectively. I don't think that's probably the thing that happened before a 3rd and 12. Catch my drift? So for Florida, if they can run the football, or rather if they can create a little more of a positive down and distance scenario where I'm talking like 2nd and 5, I'm talking, heck, even 2nd and 7, 2nd and 6, like even that's acceptable because then you get to have more plays that are available to you. And that's where Florida's dangerous. When they can be multiple, especially in the run game, that's where I think they scare you. Because what do we see them do against Texas A&M? They didn't have to press offensively. It wasn't a matter of we need AR to go throw 400 yards. Folks, AR threw for 400 yards last weekend, and they lost. Those kind of big passing numbers don't always equate to success for Florida. Now, where they're dangerous is we can kind of live in our, solid down and distance and just take a profit. I've said it many times before on this program. You can't go broke getting paid. And against South Carolina and against Texas A&M, I saw an AR make good decisions, and I saw Florida as an offense just take what the defense gave them. Cool. We'll run it on 2nd and 6, set up 3rd and 2. Hey, you want to take away the deep stuff? That's fine. Shallow crossing route, we'll hit that, and we'll live to play another down and be in a good situation. Now, that becomes a lot harder to do, like I already mentioned, if you're taking a negative play on 1st down, if they're getting to the quarterback on 2nd down. Like, that's not a scenario that's going to favor Florida, needless to say. But if they can stay ahead of the sticks and they can be multiple offensively, could be an interesting day for the Gators. So keep an eye on that. Now, here's the backbreaker for me in this game. Florida State gets 2 of their best playmakers back. Johnny Wilson, about 11 feet tall, and Micah Pittman, transfer from Oregon, have both been dogs this year for Florida State. Now you look at the Florida secondary, they've struggled. All right, they're giving up right around 240 yards passing a game. Doesn't sound horrific, but they've really struggled with dynamic receivers. I'm thinking about Evan Stewart at Texas A&M. Only a freshman. He gave him the business. Haynes King, you know how I feel about Haynes King. I don't think he's a phenomenal quarterback for Texas A&M, and he had right around 270 yards passing. And so with that being said, I think Florida State's ability to be multiple and ability to convert those potentially, longer down and distances on 3rd down. Having that ace in the hole for Johnny Wilson and Micah Pittman on your offense back, I think that creates a whole lot of issues for Florida. So, in terms of our prediction, I don't think we see Florida have a letdown in culture. I think Billy Napier has this program's mind right enough for them to be able to give this, a really strong fight in Tallahassee. But at the end of the day, I think this game means too much, means more potentially for Mike Norvell in what he's building at Florida State. And I think there's just better matchups across the board right now for Florida State. I like the Noles to actually win this one close, 30-27. So we like Florida State to win, but we like the Gators to end up covering. And I'll just say this, I would not be surprised in the slightest if Florida pulls off the upset. But given the common sense and logic that I think we have to apply to this game, I think Florida State ends up coming out victorious in the Sunshine Showdown. How about that? Going against our own common knowledge there. Or going against our own philosophy and not packing wisdom, common sense, logic for, whatever it may be. For rivalry weekend, we're going to pack it for that game just because of the matchups, and I think we got to take a look at that. So that's kind of the way that we fare there. All right. If you haven't yet subscribed, we would love to have you at the party. I'm not going to beg. I'm just going to invite you into this whole operation. It's a great place to be. And we go live on Tuesday and Thursday right now. And so you will never miss a minute of it if you're subscribed, if you got the bell. I'll leave it at that. All right. This game is potentially the most exciting to me of the entire rivalry weekend. Well, I guess outside of Ohio State, Notre Dame. I'll try that again. Notre Dame going to USC. USC favored by 5.5 points. One of the most intriguing matchups of the entire weekend. USC coming off a weekend where they made a statement against UCLA at the Rose Bowl. So you go from one rivalry to the next. For USC, it's all on the table. Every single thing that they wanted before the year began is right in front of them. I believe they control their own destiny. I believe they have a very legitimate shot to make the college football playoff. For Caleb Williams personally, I believe he has a very legitimate shot to play for a Heisman Trophy. Dude's been absolutely balling these last few weeks. Like, I don't know if there's a better player in the country these last few weeks than Caleb Williams. And if he puts on a show against Notre Dame, I think that's a very strong statement to the Heisman voters. USC, I'll make a quick note on this. USC now has a number of stages lined up for them. They just beat UCLA. They got Notre Dame in a primetime matchup at night, and they're going to have the Pac-12 title game. All three will have national exposure, something that USC hasn't had for the duration of the year. So if you're just turning into USC, I don't blame you because of how late those games have been, but I would pay attention. Going to be a whole lot of fun. Going to be a show on that turf. I guess it's grass at the Coliseum. It's going to be a show. Tune in. For Notre Dame, got a quiet confidence about themselves. That win over Clemson, I promise you, was a ton of, yeah, this thing's working. We finally put it together. We finally got this thing rolling. And they've been rolling really since. Had a kind of a closer call against Navy. It is what it is. They were dominating most of that game. Navy got back into it. This is a tremendous opportunity for Marcus Freeman to get not just one, but 2 signature wins in his first year as the head coach of the Fighting Irish. I mean, think about what that would be. If Notre Dame wins this game, you beat Clemson, and you go on the road and beat one of the top-ranked teams in the country in your rival in USC, I mean, come on. The script writes itself. Also, package that up, give it to recruits and say, yeah, we did that in year one. I'm just saying. It's a great opportunity for Marcus Freeman, and I promise you, they're excited. They're chomping at the bit. They're ready to roll. First question for me, who sets the pace in this game? Who sets the pace? Because Notre Dame, they want to run the football. We'll talk about more of that in a second, but they want to control the tempo, run the ball, pound the rock, and just allow Caleb Williams to enjoy the game, but enjoy it from the bench and have a cup of Gatorade in his hand. That's how they want to get down Notre Dame. Now, for USC, they want to go fast. They want to score a lot of points, and they do it really effectively, scoring 43 points per game as of right now are the Trojans. It's good for number 3 in the country. They're rolling. You saw it last week against UCLA, scored 48. Like, they've only scored less than 30 one time this year. That was at Oregon State. I think it was 17 that they ended up getting a win, but they can play that kind of game too. But if USC is able to set the pace, and let's say USC gets out to let's say it's 17-7 end of the first quarter. UCLA is a really good offense. They put up, I think it was over 400 yards of total offense, scored 45 points. They still weren't able to catch USC. Now, Notre Dame plays a different style. I don't think they're quite as prolific offensively. And if you spot Usain Bolt in a 100-meter race, 10 meters, you're not winning that race. So Notre Dame needs to avoid playing catch-up with USC. If USC draws first blood and gets out to that 10-meter head start that we just talked about, it's going to be a long day for the Fighting Irish. Not to mention it's at home for USC. The crowd starts to get more into it. There's a lot of excitement around this program now in LA. That would be big for USC. So keep an eye on that. Who sets the tempo? Who sets the pace in this kind of football game? Second thing we got to look at, and this is huge. Can Notre Dame take the pressure off of Drew Pine? Now, Drew Pine, in my estimation, has done a good job managing everything for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame fans will, get after him a little bit. That's fine. I understand. He's thrown 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Has he been prolific? Is he winning the Heisman Trophy? No, of course not. But he's doing what's asked of him, and he's, like I said, keeping this ship on track. Notre Dame is a 60% run team. The bottom line here, you don't want to ask Drew Pine to go out there and throw the ball 30 times. I mean, could he do it? I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying that's not the kind of world you want to live in. Like I already mentioned, you want to run the football with Estime and Diggs and get downhill, control the line of scrimmage, and win this game by playing defense with your offense. Control time of possession. Kind of have that same attitude you did against Clemson. Be able to just keep them off the field and make it a low-scoring, muddy, gross sort of game for USC. That would favor Notre Dame. Now, on the flip side, if you can't, and if it ends up being a game where you say, hey, Drew Pine, man, we're down by 10 points, third quarter, we got to start slinging it around the yard. Well, then USC, been opportunistic, and you start to press, start to get outside of your game plan, start to get outside of your structure. You ask Drew Pine to do something that he's not accustomed to doing and having to try and catch one of the best offenses in the country, that is USC. So that's pressure you just don't want to apply to Drew Pine in this scenario. Could he do it? Not saying he can't. I'm just saying you're not catching USC if they're scoring 40, and you're asking the Notre Dame offense to do the same thing. So here's my problem for Notre Dame. Maybe challenge is the better word, depending on how you look at it. This game against USC requires the same blueprint as what it took for you to beat Clemson. Now, you look back at that game, you say, okay, well, what did it take to beat Clemson? Well, it took 2 interceptions, one of them being a pick six, the other set up a short field, which was like inside the 20-yard line, I believe. The other was a blocked punt. So you have 3 plays that I don't want to say broke your way, but 3 plays that you would have to, in my opinion, have the equivalent of recreating. Because you saw that happen, and that was really what took so much pressure off Drew Pine was, okay, we got a short field, defense scored, special teams got us on the board essentially. Like those 3 plays changed the entire complexion of the game. So you say, okay, we need turnovers from USC. Great, let's make it happen. Well, here's the issue, man. USC is number 1 in the country in terms of not giving the ball away. Number 1 in terms of turnover margin, right around 1.8. And you flip it on its head and say, well, taking the ball away, they're at 2 takeaways a game. Are they prolific defensively? Could you run on them? Yeah, maybe. Other teams have done it before pretty effectively. But I mean, I'll say this. They are high risk, high reward. And they've cashed in multiple times, has Alex Grinch and that defense. And so for that reason, I don't believe Notre Dame is going to be able to create enough magic, create enough fortunate plays for them in terms of taking the ball away and, making it messy. So with that being said, I don't see a world where there's able to just catch the USC offense. Now, I think Notre Dame battles. I think they give them a really strong push. I think they continue to prove that Marcus Freeman is the guy that he's building something at Notre Dame. But again, USC, too potent, too many points, too much at stake for the Trojans at home. I think USC ends up winning this game 38-28 in the Coliseum. Keep in mind now, LA, a place that a lot of people talk about is, yeah, there's excitement around the program when they're playing well, but also you got the beach, you have Hollywood, you got all these things that are calling for your attention in LA. Well, I promise you, USC, they keep on trending upward, playing for a Pac-12 title here pretty soon. They're going to have the attention of LA. And I think with that will come a lot of momentum around the program, to say the least. All right. This is a fun one. The Oregon Classic. Little platypus action. You got a beaver, you got a duck. I just call it the Platypus Bowl. I'm still trying to get that to have some traction, but regardless, Oregon is favored by 3 as they go to Corvallis. Now, a tricky place to play. Jonathan Smith done a really good job as the head coach there. In a relatively short amount of time, he's turned around that program. Now, in a shorter amount of time, Oregon and Dan Lanning, they got this thing humming right now. And Oregon, I think, is a sleeping giant. And as Dan Lanning continues to grow that program, a lot of good things are coming their way. But as it pertains to this game, I think Oregon is in a really good spot. They showed a ton of grit last week getting that win against Utah in a spot that really could have been a letdown for them, in a spot where nobody would have blamed them to have a letdown after they lost to Washington. Showed a lot of character and showed me how far along that culture is under Dan Lanning. I promise you, they have all their attention focused on Oregon State. Because Oregon, fighting for their own Pac-12 title appearance. They would love, and the folks in Eugene know this, they would absolutely love to see USC in that Pac-12 title game. Now, for Oregon State, this would make their year. And that's not to, little bro Oregon State by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying, if you can beat your rival, of course that means a ton. But to upset, and upset's maybe the wrong word, they're favored by 3 points, but to ruin Oregon's postseason aspirations and be the reason why they're not able to go to the Pac-12 title game and to have a footnote in that story, I promise you, that would do wonders for momentum around Corvallis and the direction of that program. Maybe the in-state conversation becomes maybe a touch more interesting for those recruits and someone deciding between Oregon and Oregon State. So bottom line, there's no love lost between these teams. I mean, this rivalry is as serious as it gets. I'll just leave it at that. First question. What's the sense of urgency that Oregon can create within Oregon State? Because Oregon State, they're a blue-collar operation, man. They're going to run the football. They're throwing it like 39% of the time. They're going to grind it out. They're going to put the ball on the ground, not, literally in the sense of a fumble, but they're going to run the football consistently and make you say, uncle. That's who they want to be. Now, when does that become difficult to do? It becomes difficult to do when the other team's scoring a lot of points. You can only, push so much on the ground as long as you're able to score points. We'll talk about more of that in a second. But Oregon's scoring right around 40 a game. So they're going fast. Like, it's sort of the yin and yang situation here. Oregon's going to score a lot of points. And when they create that urgency, is there any sense of panic from Oregon State? Maybe panic's the wrong word, but is there urgency to the point where you get outside of the game that you're comfortable playing? You start to throw the football a little bit more. You start to do some things you haven't done before. And when you start to press, you and I both know that creates mistakes. When you create mistakes, give a team like Oregon more ammo, it's just a bad situation. Oregon's going to make you pay if you make mistakes. And so for Oregon State, being able to play their game is crucial, but do they press at all? Does Oregon score enough points early, they jump out to a 14-point lead to create that sense of urgency, that negative sense of urgency? Something to watch for. Second thing that I'm looking at, can the Beavers answer scores? Because like we were already saying a second ago, being able to play their game is so crucial to the style of this game. And Oregon's going to gonna push the tempo, like I just said. Now, the only way that you get outside of yourself is if you get down. And if they get down, that would mean they're not answering scores. So I think it's very important, especially in the early going. This first quarter may tell the story of the outcome of this game. Can Oregon State go score for score? And it doesn't have to be the same kind of fashion. Like if Oregon hits a 40-yard bomb in the first 30 seconds of the game, Oregon State can't afford to say, okay, we got to do that now. No. Oregon State continue to play their kind of power brand of football. Like I said, blue-collar operation. Take 5 to 10 minutes off the clock if that's what you're able to do and able to just kind of keep Bo Nix watching on the sideline. That would be the kind of game that Oregon State needs to be able to play. Now, it's only good if you're answering scores. And when I say answer scores, I don't mean field goal for touchdowns. You can't trade 3 for 7 week in and drive in and drive out with this program. Just not something that's going to work. Oregon State knows it. Oregon knows it. It's no secret. Okay? So, being able to answer scores with touchdowns, go haymaker for haymaker, that's going to keep this thing tight, keep it in close proximity for Oregon State. So here's the deal for me. From a matchup perspective, I just think Oregon is too multiple. And that's not to knock Oregon State. I just think Oregon can fight whatever style this game ends up being. Hey, we need to throw the ball a lot. We can do that with Bo Nix and company. We got to run it. We've done it all. Your offensive line is one of the best in the country. So any way that this thing gets sliced, I just think that Oregon's going to be able to adapt to the kind of game that Oregon State wants to play. And how many of you know, if you're multiple, especially at the college football level, and you can fight different styles, you're going to be the favorite every single week, regardless of what Vegas thinks. Okay, the hard count will make you the favorite every single week. So I'll leave it at that. At the end of the day, I think Oregon, just like I said, has too much multiple options offensively. I think the defense does enough. I think they're able to commit enough to that run game to force Oregon State to press. At the end of the day, I think Oregon ends up pulling away. I like Oregon to actually win this game 31-24. So it ends up being a little bit closer at the end, but I think Oregon does stretch it, and I think they do end up covering that 3 points. The Oregon Classic, man. How about it? That'd be a big one. That'd be a big win for Dan Lanning. Tell you what, to win the state in his first year and to have all the success that they've had and potentially get a shot at USC, not too bad for your first year. Not too bad, especially remember how this whole thing started? Got blown out against Georgia. And everyone was saying, oh, man, we ranked Oregon too high, didn't we? We ranked Oregon too. Nope. No. It's a process. You're building something. It's development. We saw the dividends there for Oregon. But again, Oregon, I think they ended up winning that game in Corvallis. All right, we're going to do one more prediction, then we're getting to your questions. So if you have yet to jump in the chat, do so right now. Hit us with your questions. Nick Brake, the keeper of the queue, going to get to them here in just a few short minutes, all right? So get those in now, and also subscribe to the channel while you're at it. We would love to have y'all. Okay, here we go. The Palmetto Bowl. South Carolina at Clemson. Clemson, a 14.5-point favorite. It's a noon kick, noon Eastern kick, and this game is a lot more interesting than it was a week ago. Last week, probably looked at this game and said, okay, cool. I mean, I'm all for rivalries. Both programs have been interesting this year. Well, then South Carolina went and hung 60-plus on Tennessee. A couple other things happened, and now you're saying not only is South Carolina a fascinating case study at the end of this year, also Clemson hanging around, riding at the very back of that Roy bus, and if they're a one-loss conference champ, maybe some other things swing their way. I'm just saying. They are very much so on the outskirts of playoff watch, but I think they're on playoff watch nonetheless. Crazier things have happened. So that's just it for Clemson. I mean, they're back in the picture, and there's definitely some stakes to be played for. Everyone left Clemson for dead, and here they are just hanging around. For South Carolina, Shane Beamer and company, I love me some Shane Beamer, man. Beamer ball, that culture is on fire. They're looking to double down on what they did last week, because everybody and their mother was saying, holy smokes, this is a new South Carolina than we're ever accustomed to seeing. Yeah, it is a new South Carolina. But is it? Because to actually be a new version of yourself, you have to do it more than once. Like anybody can do a trick one time. Can you make that trick your habit and then eventually not have it be a trick anymore? It's just who you are. Is that who they are? We're going to find out in this game, because Clemson's going to be a really nice test for them. but excited to see what South Carolina brings to the table. Which Spencer Rattler do we see in this game? We have been extremely transparent about how we feel about Spencer Rattler. Tons of ability, and he put it on display against Tennessee. Threw for something like 6 touchdowns, over 400 yards, like passed out a clinic tape, got a T-shirt and a juice box as he left. Like, that was the kind of game that Spencer Rattler played against Tennessee. Do we see that same kind of performance from him? Or do we see the version against Florida, where he threw for like 150 yards, nothing much to write home about? The offense scored no points. It was like a fake punt that got him in the end zone. Two very different Spencer Rattlers. Now, I will say this. I think Spencer Rattler is very much so a better version of himself when he has more help, especially in the run game. Now, at the time of us being live right now, Marshawn Lloyd, Christian Beal-Smith are both listed as questionable. Didn't have them last week. You had Jaheim Bell, who is a tight end. Think about that for a second. You got a tight end playing running back. Now, Jaheim Bell is no run-of-the-mill tight end. Absolute dog carrying the football. Carried it 17 times last week for like 80-plus yards. We say it every single week with South Carolina, and we break down their games, but they have a rushing threshold. My estimation is that rushing threshold is right around 100 yards. Cross that 100-yard threshold, and Shane Beamer's like, I've never lost here at South Carolina when we do that. Last week was no exception. So Spencer Rattler, we need to see a version of him where he's on his game like he was last week, but at the same time, the run game needs to be that complement to him. Because so early in the year, we were saying, yeah, Spencer Rattler looks like his old self where he's throwing picks and not really, making great decisions. But also remember, the offensive line did not do him any favors, and they were not running the football effectively. So it all fell on Spencer Rattler's shoulders, which was the exact thing we said at the beginning of the season before they even played a game. We said it, and Shane Beamer said it. We can't ask him to be Superman. If you put it all on Spencer Rattler and just say, we better have the best version of you today, I think you're kind of rolling the dice there. So, which Spencer Rattler shows up? Tennessee Spencer Rattler or subpar 150 yards, a pick and a touchdown Spencer Rattler? That could be the difference. Second thing I'm looking at, kind of on the inverse of that for Clemson, how much is Clemson able to tee it up for DJ? We all thought about it during the year. It's kind of been a conversation that's ongoing throughout this season. Is DJ Uiagalelei, is he going to be, someone that keeps them from reaching their potential, or is he going to be that cog that allows this whole operation to keep on going forward? Well, he's the quarterback, so he's going to take the brunt of the criticism and the majority of the praise. Just the way it works out when you're the quarterback at a Power 5 school and a brand like Clemson. Now, when I say how much do they tee it up for him, we forget there's actually 10 other players on the field that need to help him, and there's 11 other players on the defense that need to help make his job easier as well. And against Notre Dame, that was not the case. So, for Clemson, a big thing that they do is running to set up the pass. Will Shipley, Phil Maffa are both dogs. Feed those guys, man. Let them eat. I want to see somewhere in the range of 100 to 150 yards rushing for Clemson. Because when you do that, South Carolina front starts to creep up. We say it all the time. Those safeties start to fill in run support, and then stuff opens up downfield. Can hit the tight end of the seam. Can get the ball to your playmakers in the slot. Like, that's the kind of reality that needs to be the case for Clemson. I'm not saying DJ Uiagalelei can't just be the guy that you put it on his shoulders, because he actually did that against Wake Forest. People want to forget that, but he's actually shown multiple times he's a very solid college quarterback. Winning the Heisman Trophy? I mean, no, but he can be a guy that wins games for you. This is the kind of game where I think you want to have a little bit more of a family affair. On the defensive side of things, like I said, they got worked against Notre Dame. Can they create a short field for the offense? Can they hold up their end of the bargain? Take it a step further. What if it takes a second for the Clemson offense? What if they have a recalibration period? It wouldn't be the first time we've seen it. Is the defense able to hold it down and keep the game close and keep it, let's just say it's 10-10 and a half. Can the defense come out and get 2 stops, maybe 3 stops, and allow DJ to eventually get in rhythm, figure out a new game plan? I think that's crucial to watch for, because it could be that kind of scenario where Clemson takes a second to rev the engine and then put it in gear. So how much can you help DJ is really important, because he's shown when he has it teed up for him, he's pretty good about cashing in. Is he 100%? No. But you feel good about your chances when you have everything else around DJ set up for success. And running the football and playing good defense is, I think, the first 2 steps to allowing that offense to be successful. Here's the matchup I'm watching, though. South Carolina's wide receiving core in Clemson's secondary. Last week, I know the run game was working for South Carolina, but that receiving core ate, and they ate greedy against the Tennessee secondary with problems. Juice Wells had a $177, something like 11 catches. Like, you went to the Wells, you went to Juice Wells a couple times, man. You found your matchup, and you continued to exploit it. We say it a lot. This game's a 14.5-point favorite for Clemson. So if you want to talk about it on that regard, it would be an upset. Like South Carolina pulling off an upset, quote unquote, for the second week in a row would require that same kind of efficacy from one matchup. Is it Juice Wells? I don't know, because Clemson's secondary, they've been a lot better as of late, but we've seen from this program they have the potential to, I don't know if expose is the right word, but there's some plays to be had against the secondary. Can you get enough of them? Can you get enough to rev the engine and score some points and then put that pressure back on DJ Uiagalelei? We say it a lot. You put pressure on offenses to do things they're not accustomed to doing. You say, DJ, we need you to throw 40 passes this game. I'm not saying he couldn't do it. Again, I will not count out DJ Uiagalelei. I think he's shown us too many times that he is a good quarterback. Is he amazing? No, but I'm just saying if he throws it 40 times a game, that's advantage South Carolina, because that means, one, you've taken away the run game enough, or at least for a short enough period of time, to where your offense can score some points, and now Clemson's got to catch you. Now they're in a foot race and trying to keep up with you because Juice Wells went for 100, because Van went for 100, because Jaheim Bell's making his presence felt at tight end and at running back. That's the kind of game that South Carolina wants to play. Now, if that Clemson secondary rises to the occasion, like we've seen them do in the past as well, it's kind of a little bit of different flavors for different weeks. I think that could make them a lot more one-dimensional, because its front seven for Clemson is really good. Have they had a perfect year? No, nobody has. A lot of talent on that front seven. If they can play their game on the back end, that's going to free the front end up to really go ahead and work and get into hunting mode. So that's the story I'm watching for, because South Carolina's offensive line has had their issues, but the quick game gets going, everything kind of opens up. So that matchup between the secondary for Clemson, South Carolina receiving core, I think will have a big impact on this game. So here's our prediction for this game. Spencer Rattler went berserk last week. We picked against South Carolina last week, and we were dead wrong, man. I'll tell you what. Spencer Rattler, game of his life. That's my concern. Was that Spencer Rattler's game of his life last week? Is he going to regress back to the mean? I feel a little bit more comfortable saying that's going to be the case than he goes for 6 touchdowns and 400 yards again. So I think Spencer Rattler doesn't play poorly, but I think he kind of goes back to a more similar version of what we've seen in the past. I think DJ actually plays pretty well. I think they run the football effectively, play more balanced, which allows him to be freed up to make plays. And I think Clemson ends up winning this game 34-21. So South Carolina covers, but I think Clemson ends up winning this game at home to finish out the regular season. That's got to be one of the coolest names too, Nick. Palmetto Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
It's freaking sweet. Without further ado, the best thing that we do here, you join the party. Nick Brake, the keeper of the queue, jumping on the camera now, man. How we doing, Nick? How we doing in the live chat?
We're fine, man. Usually when a team loses, let alone loses to Vanderbilt, they're a little quiet. Our Florida fans, shout out to them, credit to them. They are here, and they are here in force.
Let's go.
And they are making my job as the keeper of the queue and the keeper of the keys out here a little difficult. But I'm happy they're here. They're not asking questions, but they're making me ask a lot of questions.
Okay. Are they upset with us? We didn't.
They're
pick
not
them to be Florida
upset.
State.
No,
and that's,
no.
I wanted to. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But just from a matchup perspective, I think Florida State has the edge there.
No,
What's the chatter, Nick?
They're
What's
not
the tea
upset.
right now?
They're not really saying a lot of anything. It's just kind of some arguments going back and forth between the Florida State. The Florida fans are getting hyped for the game.
It's good banter.
Just like we are.
It's good banter.
It's banter, all right. But it's a lot of fun. And once again, Florida fans, I'm glad you're here. And this is what it's all about, right? It's the people's show.
Absolutely.
JD, I'm looking for some questions, so why don't you tell the good people to subscribe to the channel?
Absolutely. Folks, you're here, and you don't owe us anything for doing this show. Cost you absolutely $0. we wouldn't be the people show we're charging y'all to watch this show, right? That's not how we get down. So if you want to help us, if you want to support this program, if you want to add to this whole community, add to this party, subscribe to the channel. I'll leave it at that. Also, I'll mention this while we're on here. We tie in my social media as much as possible to this program from an interaction standpoint, okay? So we actually did a segment last live show, I think it was. One of you tweeted out a really insightful thought about Texas and the quarterback room and said, okay, that's one, a viewer of our show. Two, it's an insightful thought. Let's do a segment on it. And so we broke it down, featured the tweet, all that. So if you haven't yet followed me on the social channels, at JD Piquel on Twitter, at JD Piquel on Instagram. On Friday, do a little State of the Union, kind of similar to this, where I just sit down on my back porch. Won't do it on my back porch this weekend as we're going to Columbus, but have a little, session, just you and me, talking about what you want to talk about, getting your questions in, and we just kind of have a good time chopping it up. It's all on video. It's a good time, but that lives on my story on Friday. I'll post a little question sticker, get in your questions. You get the picture. The party rolls on. Also, Nick, while we have the time on air, we're going to Ohio State, Michigan, in Columbus at the Shoe. I am so juiced to see so many of y'all there. It's going to be an absolute movie. I mean, I heard the other day, I don't know if this is true, there was rumors about LeBron going. I don't know if that's true or not. I know LeBron's kind of an Ohio State fan, but that just shows you the impact and the potential stage that we have set for us and what will be a playoff game in Ohio State and Michigan set to get rolling. So, also, I'll probably do a lot on my social media, Nick, trying to chronicle and document as much as possible that whole trip. But, yeah, it should be a good time, folks. So follow me there on the socials. Again, at JD Piquel on Twitter and on Instagram. The DMs usually stay open as well, so we get to have a good interaction there. But, Nick, what's the latest, man? We getting any love from the chat? We getting any questions in here yet?
We are. Okay, I found some. Jay Ward. Thank you, Jay Ward, for asking this question. Will Bijan Robinson win the Doak Walker Award this year, JD?
Ooh, okay. Well, I'm trying to think now. My mind's just kind of racing who other running backs would be in contention for that award. Bijan Robinson's got to at least be, one of the favorites. Let's see, who else? I would imagine Bucky Irving's in the conversation. Now, here's the issue. Blake Corum and Chase Brown, statistically speaking, I would imagine, are a touch ahead of where Bijan is right now. And I don't think the Doak Walker Award is geared quite the same as the Heisman in the sense that, hey, best player on the best team. But I would say this. I think what Blake Corum has done this season is nothing short of amazing. If I had to put money down today, I would say Blake Corum 1. Give me Bijan Robinson at 2. Now, he's got one more chance to wow the voters, I suppose, against Baylor. It'd be a whole lot of fun to watch him put on a show because, last week, 4 touchdowns, Nick, 200-plus yards. Absolute stuff of clinic tape. So, not impossible, but I would take Blake Corum today.
Me too, JD. I think, you're talking Blake Corum as a Heisman candidate, Heisman finalist. Look, it's close. I think Bijan is the clear second best college football running back. But yeah, I'm going with Blake.
We're on the same page.
It's
Blake
Corum.
Corum hurt, though. We'll see. We'll see if that
you're
impacts
right.
his status, but I still think he's done enough this year to have a nice resume for that award.
What
else we got, Big Nick?
Well, we got another question. Jay Ward kind of asked a follow-up question. Asked both of these earlier in the show, so I want to make sure I ask. Do you think Anthony Hill's going to commit to Texas? Again, I'll plug Josh Newberg and watch our Inside Scoop, the recruiting show. You'll find out everything you need to know about that. But what do you think, JD?
No, on the money. Follow Josh Newberg on Twitter. Also, when you subscribe, you get the Inside Scoop, so that's huge. That's 2 just phenomenal programs for you right there. I'll just say this. It feels that way. It really does. I think Texas was pretty close last time when he originally committed to Texas A&M. I get the sense, man. I don't have any super in-depth information on this, but my feeling is Texas has to at least be the leader in the clubhouse right now. Now, I'm not sure when he's going to commit next. I forget if he said a date or not, if he's going to take it to signing day or what the deal is there. The best thing I can say, the most probably accurate thing I could say is it feels that way right now. So if I had to bet money, it'd be going on the Longhorns right now, Nick. But Josh Newberg, again, has a lot of insight on that, and I promise you they are locked and loaded over there on that channel, or on that program on this channel, so make sure you check that out.
Absolutely. Sorry for the squeaking, by the way. My microphone, I need to put some oil on this.
No, you're good. It's kind of like the box, like that rap song.
Yeah. Man, someone knows I'm a Bills fan in the chat. Real question. We should all be asking, how many heart attacks did Nick have during the end of the Bills-Vikings game?
Whoa.
Thank you, Noah Farber. Quite a few. and quite a few tears shed at the end. Another question. Look, JD, I know you're a college football fan, but the NFL is being represented. I've counted on 3 questions.
Okay, there we go.
And 3 things. Someone wants to know who they should start. I'm not Chris says Donovan Peoples-Jones or Lockett in my flex. Definitely Lockett.
Okay.
Tyler Lockett's a good PPR player. But JD, enough about the NFL. We are a college football show. But man, I'm telling you, a lot of Florida Gator fans are making it kind of hard to find questions. Drowsy Dragon,
okay.
JD, do you think Hayden rushes for over 100 yards against TTUN on Saturday?
Great question. So here's my thought on that. I'm just curious who all will be available for Ohio State. Like, is Mayan Williams going to be available? Is Travion Henderson going to be available? If Dallin Hayden is the feature back for Ohio State, I think he actually will run for 100 yards. If he shares the load, I don't know how that'll all work out. I don't think he'll have, as many carries to get to that number. But if he is the feature back on Saturday, Dallin Hayden, they fed him a lot against Maryland. And I love that. I thought that was a phenomenal way to kind of empower their depth. Dallin Hayden, the guy who also hasn't, played a ton of snaps this year outside of these last 2 weeks. So we'll see how fresh those legs are, and I'm excited. I think that's a fair number to put to it, though. I would take the over for 100 yards for nice. Dallin Hayden. Now, he's going to have his work cut out for him. Michigan and that front 7 is absolutely terrorizing, but I think that Dallin Hayden's going to be able to pick up a sneaky 100 yards. I think Travion Henderson had like 174 last week. So, or excuse me, not 174, excuse me. He had about 74 in the game a season ago. So there could be some money on the table there. I like Ohio State to feed Dallin Hayden if he's their guy. But okay. I love it. Good question there.
Sam Wager, by the way, wants you to shout out the Hoosiers because they beat Mel Tucker this weekend.
Okay.
The Hoosiers also beat my Hilltoppers, my alma mater, so I'm not too big on them. WKU should have won that game, Sam. So I wouldn't be too impressed by the Hoosiers in Indiana because the Hilltoppers aren't the best football team, and beating them by 3 points in overtime is not something to brag about. But they also ask, since Notre Dame has been putting up 40 recently, do you think this game will be won when USC has the ball or when Notre Dame has the ball? Joe Burrow also asks, who do you got in that game? You already answered, but this talks to Notre Dame, USC, JD.
Good question. So I think it's going to be USC pushing the tempo. Like Notre Dame, yes, they've scored fairly effectively the last few weeks, but I think with what USC is going to force them to do, the amount of time they're going to have to answer scores, I just think USC has too much firepower. And not that Notre Dame can't get to that same output offensively. I just think the fashion and the pressure of which will be applied to them because of having to keep pace with USC, I just think USC is going to be able to eventually run away with this thing. So I think the final score we had them winning by 10, but I think it'll feel relatively in control for USC. So Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame's actually going to trend upward, though. I really do. I'm excited for what Marcus Freeman's building there. We just had somebody jump in our comment section, Nick, and they asked, what do we think about the Notre Dame commit?
Yes, Joe Bro. What do you think about the new Notre Dame commit?
I love that we got people asking about that.
Yeah.
See, my thought with Notre Dame recruiting is it's just the tip of the iceberg. Like, if you're committing to Marcus Freeman right now, you're committing without real proof of concept. If you want to talk about the Clemson game being proof of concept, okay, that's fine. But what Notre Dame is right now in year 1 is not what they're going to be in year 3 under Marcus Freeman. He's a first-time head coach. And so the ceiling for Notre Dame, I think, is got to be what the selling point is for kids going forward. Like, I'm excited to see what he builds there. What do we think about the commit? It's phenomenal. You got a quarterback. You got someone to build around in your class. I believe they have C.J. Carr committed as well. So I think it was a 2024 they just got, though, Nick. I could be off on that. But anyway, Notre Dame is picking up steam. Don't be surprised if they start to crescendo in the years to come on the recruiting trail. But Marcus Freeman's building something there. It's making Notre Dame cool again, too. With the pictures on the visits, like, it's not stuffy old Notre Dame anymore. They're taking, like, gold chair kind of photos. They're, they got a young coach. There's a lot of new juice around Notre Dame. So I'm excited to see what they do. But my thoughts on that, Nick.
Okay. Yeah. Another good question from Jeffrey Morgan. Say Caleb Williams losing the conference championship, loses this weekend. Say Corum's out and C.J. Stroud plays lackluster against Michigan. who is the Heisman frontrunner? Why isn't there a clear-cut one so far this season?
Yeah,
I think he wants you to say Drake May, honestly, to get all those three out of the way.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think you would have to look. Let's see. So, no Caleb Williams, no C.J. Stroud, no Blake Corum. I mean, gosh, Hendon Hooker towards ACL, so he's not going to play. Does it fall to someone at Georgia? I think Stetson Bennett was like sixth best odds. That could be a point where, like, hey, just by default, we got to give it to Stetson Bennett because I would imagine they run the table and they win the SEC. Maybe they lose and you look at Jaden Daniels at LSU. Like, that would be a rabbit hole to go down. And I think someone whose name isn't getting enough mention, what about Bryce Young? Like, he has absolutely willed that team forward. And I know they haven't been the Alabama we're accustomed to seeing, but talk about a player that means so much to his program. If Bryce Young finishes the year strong and has a really, huge game, let's say 500 kind of yard game against Auburn, I would be hard pressed to, not invite him to New York. So we'll see what happens there. I'd be surprised if all of those things fall into place. I do think the winner of Ohio State, Michigan, whether it's Stroud, whether it's Corum, whoever wins that game, I think it will have enough exposure for the voters for they'll just say, okay, you know what? This guy, best player, best team, Heisman. Kind of that situation, especially if they play well in the Big Ten title game. So I think C.J. Stroud is teed up really well, but I also think Caleb Williams is teed up really well. So we'll see how that how that all plays out. But yeah, they're trying to trap us in there, Nick. I don't know who they want us to give it to. Drake May, I guess, could be a guy, but they just lost last week, so
yeah. Well, JD. Fans, like we've always seen, fans who ask the questions or people who ask the questions in the chat usually have an answer they have in mind. Jeffrey, who asked this question, was a great question, by the way, Jeffrey. Bo Nix. It's Bo Nix, all caps. Bo Nix, period. I think Jeffrey thinks it's Bo Nix. And a lot of people in the comments, what about Bo? Hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'll just be honest, Nick. That's somebody I just completely forgot about in that whole conversation. I think absolutely he's in that top 2, top 3 conversation. A lot of us, I mean, I say myself personally, I kind of subtracted him from that whole equation after the loss to Washington, but he's up there with touchdown leaders, total touchdown leaders in the entire country. He's played really well. I mean, if Caleb Williams loses out, I would imagine there may be a loss baked in there to Oregon in the Pac-12 title game, and Bo Nix does it. Like, that would be a scenario I'd buy into for sure. Actually, I think I'll change my answer. Man of the people show. We're going with Bo Nix if all that happens, and you get a subpar performance from those other players we mentioned. We'll buy the Bo Nix stock when that happens. But I 100% agree.
And remember, I mean, a lot of things had to go down in this scenario. Caleb Williams losing, Corum not playing, Stroud playing bad. So it's still a long shot. But Bo Nix, man, I'm telling you. Who would have seen that coming?
He's ferocious. My only concern with that scenario is kind of like I already said, I just have a tough time seeing whoever wins the Big Ten title, whoever wins Michigan, Ohio State, they're just going to be in such good position. I mean, C.J. Stroud, for context, threw for like 76 yards against Northwestern. You think, oh, okay, big Heisman drop-off. Well, no, they won the game. It would have been a Heisman drop-off if they lost the game, but they won that game, and he was still the top guy in terms of betting odds for the Heisman in Vegas. So winning just matters so much to the voters. Absolutely,
yeah, which, I mean, fair or not fair, that's how it is. It's definitely more so than just who's the best. Absolutely. If Rattler stays another year, with Carolina already pushing an 8-9 win season, with his potential and Beamer's culture, where do you see them standing next year nationally and also in the SEC, JD?
So I said this on the Spurs Up show, shout out Spurs Up show, not too long ago. And the question was like, hey, where can South Carolina live from a win total perspective? And I really think with Shane Beamer as your head coach, you have the right guy running the operation. So I think 8 wins is a very realistic place to have be your floor going forward. Maybe floor is the wrong word. Kind of be the median for you going forward. If Rattler comes back, I would hope that he's able to duplicate what he did against Tennessee. Like, that's super important for them going forward. I still have concerns about the defense, man. Like, the defense is good. Don't get it twisted. They've done some really good things, especially what we saw against Tennessee and making some of those timely plays, but they still have a ways to go in my mind. And so I think it's a matter of getting the offense figured out consistently, not just for one game, but consistently with Spencer Rattler back. And then on top of that, the defense has to take steps forward, and that starts with recruiting. And Shane Beamer's doing that. He's hitting the trail hard. I promise you, a lot of kids want to commit to Shane Beamer right now, and they're making a great case in the recruiting trail. But yeah, it's going to be, I think, a little bit of time before they start getting to that, like, hey, let's win the SEC, let's do this,
Absolutely.
let's do that. Like, I think that's probably taking a little bit more time down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, JD, good point. How's 2 more questions, my
Let's
friend?
do 2 more, brother. I love it.
Then Thanksgiving break can commence for some people out here.
There you go.
Waiting for it to happen. We got a good question from Garrett Bauer. What will Florida State fans think if Norvell loses to a down bad Florida team 2 years in a row? It would be it would be down bad for them if they lost, wouldn't it, JD?
Oh, it'd be so down bad. And the reason why it's so down bad is because Billy Napier and company, like we already said, like, you know, they're down bad, lost to Vanderbilt. Billy Napier's in his first year at Florida. Mike Norvell has been at this thing for a minute in Tallahassee. This is a game where there is no other way to say it. This is a must-win for Mike Norvell. For him to take that next step, for him to garner even more support in-house, like, this is a crucial game for Florida State. So to answer the question, how would they respond? I think it would be, in some people's minds, I think they'd say, wow, what a bad year. Like, I know they've won, you know, however many games so far, and it's been an upward trend for them. Mm-hmm. If they lose to Florida, they would, for a lot of people, I think, consider this a bad season. Not everybody, but I think there'd be a percentage of the fan base. It's like, we can't have that be the way that this thing goes, Mike Norvell. Can't be a reality.
No. Florida State has to win this, especially given the circumstances for Florida. Good question, Garrett. This feels like a fitting question to end this show today. Colin Craig, JD, and Nick both seem like guys who don't like turkey. That's not true on this side. I don't know about you, JD.
Yeah.
But what food will you be looking forward to this Thanksgiving?
I like that. Nick, I'm going to let you answer first, brother, and then I'll answer and get us out of here. But how about you answer
Sounds
first
good.
and tell the people on Thanksgiving?
Well, first things first, Colin also says, I bet you like Jell-O salad. I do not like Jell-O salad. That is an untrue story. I do, however, very much so enjoy stuffing, dressing, whatever you call it. I love it. It's got a lot of gluten in it. It's horrible for you, but tastes amazing. I'm also someone from German descent. Corn pudding is something very popular at my dinner table. Love it. But JD, man, I just like all food.
Corn pudding.
If it's bad for you, it's pretty good. Yeah, but
You
corn
animal.
pudding is terrific.
You absolute animal. Well, Nick, we appreciate you, man. Have a phenomenal Thanksgiving, and I hope that all of those fixings are at the break table when it's all said and done.
Yep, and next time I see you, JD, we will know. Is it Ohio State or Michigan? Because a lot of people in the chat are asking if they want to know. Just in about an hour or so, JD's video prediction from this broadcast will be hitting our YouTube. So keep refreshing that page because you can find out his prediction then. But JD, I'll see you, man.
100%. Nick, appreciate you, brother. To answer that question, the favorite Thanksgiving food, one, not true. Do love turkey. Eat it every Thanksgiving. There's no bad... there's no beef, to put it the wrong way, about turkey over on this side. Love stuffing. I love honey mustard. I love the rolls. Like, I'm a big rolls guy. Fun fact, little side note here. Jake Olson is someone who's actually going to be on this program here very, very soon. Did a video today, going to come out at some point this week. He and I have a tradition, the duration of, I guess, the last few years, where we finish our meal and we weigh ourselves at the beginning of the day, finish our meal, weigh ourselves again, and see who is able to add the most weight. So to answer that question from that perspective, anything and everything is what we're eating on Thanksgiving, very much so, including the turkey. All right? So for all of us here, we're so grateful for you. Like, Thanksgiving week is one of the most beautiful times of the year. Just so happens to coincide with the beautiful thing that is college football. And like I just said, we're all very thankful to y'all for supporting and watching this show. Thankful for y'all that have subscribed. Thankful for y'all jumping in the live chat. Like, we are very thankful for our audience and the community that y'all are helping us build here. It's a special thing, and excited to keep moving forward. All right, so next time you see us, we will be post-trip to Michigan, Ohio State. Going to the shoe in Columbus. We'll see a ton of y'all there. Going to be an absolute blast. Subscribe to the channel. Going to do some content actually from Ohio State, especially post-game. Want to make sure you're locked in for that. Also, follow me on the social channels, at JD Pickell on Twitter, at JD Pickell on Instagram. Have a lot of interaction we're going to do there, a lot on the Instagram story. Going to put stuff on Twitter videos. Like, we're going to be rocking and rolling there, so make sure you're locked in. Make sure you're following me so you don't miss a minute of any single thing that we do. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Happy Thanksgiving. We're going to keep the party rolling. and we will see y'all next time.